Hello, everyone. This is Doug Campbell-John. Welcome to this week's episode of Revenue Renegades. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Jerry Donovan from Insight Partners, who does everything around revenue strategy for them, to the show. Welcome, Jeremy.
Yeah, super excited to catch up. It's been a couple of years, I think,
Yeah.
maybe dating back to your LinkedIn days. So yeah, really good to talk.
Yeah, I will. It would take too much time in the show to give you Jeremy's background, but he's technical with advanced degrees in engineering, data science. I think I don't remember if it was when you were at SalesLoft we met, but he's had stints at Gartner and Xilinx and CB Insights and a lot of other places. So and we got a chance to chat in a revenue ops roundtable recently and got a chance to reconnect. So excited for this chat.
Yeah, very cool.
So just to kick off, maybe tell us all a little bit about Insight Partners and your role in the firm.
Yeah, super high level. I actually hadn't heard of Insight, which is a bit of an embarrassment when I joined SalesLoft, but now I can do the spiel. So it's 90 billion with a B of assets under management, 556 B2B SaaS portfolio companies, and an investor side, which I am not on, and an advisory side, which I am on. So on the advisory side, we have about 40 advisors who are ex-operators like myself that go in and help our portfolio companies, once they're on board. And it's what's nice about it is, and I experienced it from the other side, is it's a pull, not a push model. So, a lot of times people will think of PE or VC as coming in there and telling people what to do. We're the exact opposite of that, which is we're here when you need us as advisors and consigliaries if you'll allow us to do that. And if not, then you go on your merry way, and that's great too.
That's kind of the dream for the entrepreneur. So we love that model. So I don't know if it's before SalesLoft days or even SalesLoft days. I don't know really the exact timing of the founding of RevOps, but obviously, earlier on in your career, the term RevOps didn't even exist, right? And you've posted on LinkedIn and done other posts about kind of this shift to collaborative RevOps team being kind of like the number one core hire for new CROs. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely happened, I think, in SalesLoft days. And I didn't start my career, like, I do consider myself a bit of a fraud, right? Like, I never carried a bag. I'm just very geeky about sales, right? I read every book. I listen to as many podcasts as I can, including yours. I talk to CROs and salespeople constantly to just learn and absorb from them. So, to your question about RevOps, what the reason I found myself in it is because I have an engineering background and the engineer has never left me. So I pursued domains where I could apply that analytical, statistical process design rigor
Mhm.
into a field that needed it. And so that was what drew me to RevOps, right? Is that sales was considered a lot more art than science. When I was at SalesLoft, I had the great fortune of working for a CRO named Sean Murray. And Sean very early on said to me, "Hey, here's the deal. I'm going to work in the business and you're going to work on the business." And I asked him for clarification. He said, in the business means like, I'm doing the talent stuff, picking people, performance managing. I am in the deal reviews, the monster deals, right? I'm going to go travel around the country and do that. I'm going to do that, all that stuff. And then what I need you to do is, we were in hyper growth mode.
Mhm.
So I need you to think about, to use the bad cliche, skating where the puck is going to be, right? So, what do we need to do from a planning point of view and infrastructure strategy in order to be in the right place 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now, so we don't get surprised by a bottleneck.
Right.
And yeah, it was awesome, to be able to kind of think about those things and solve those kinds of problems. And I think it was during that time that, like, RevOps as a term, I don't know who coined it, but really came to the fore. And most RevOps today is still highly decentralized, right? Like, in the beginning, we just had sales ops and rev ops were the same thing. And there was a separate CS ops and there was a separate marketing ops, but we sort of thought of them collectively. Eventually, the company, at least while I was there, absorbed CS ops into sales ops. So it was,
Cool.
but marketing ops still sat under the CMO. And I
Right.
don't know today, but I presume it's the same way. I mean, I think the operations person is the consigliere, should be, in the ideal, the consigliere to the leader of the function. So I don't have any kind of um, hard and fast view that this stuff needs to be centralized. I really think that, if you had a head of if you had a chief customer officer who was a peer to the head of sales and a CMO who was a peer to those folks, just let their ops people report to them.
Mhm.
I don't see any harm in that. We could spend an hour talking about that, but there's no harm in that.
Got it. So, but you've seen it work both ways. It sounds like both having kind of a centralized, more RevOps reporting into maybe even the CEO, and as well as individual kind of functional ops
Yeah,
people.
yeah. It works both ways. I think it's also important. I mean, every one of us has these, oh man, if I knew 20 years ago what I know today moments. And one of my moments of that back at Sales Loft was earlier in my career, I was kind of territorial. I think a lot of us are.
Yeah.
And I think in hindsight, like I didn't necessarily play nice with others early on, and I needed really strict boundaries, and I got upset when people would step into what I perceived as my territory and blah blah blah. And as I got older, one of the realizations I had was this stuff these boundaries are amorphous, right? And
Right.
because they went into my space, they did it with the best of intentions, you know what I mean? Sure, there are some bad actors out there or whatever, but those are rare. I mean, mostly people are just trying to do the right thing. So if you're well aligned that your North Star is, it used to just be growth, now it's efficient growth. If you're well aligned that that's your North Star, then it's just a team. Who cares, who cares who does what? So I think that maturity is important in the decentralized world.
I was probably very similar to you in not in very recent history, and I remember Jeff Weiner, who was the CEO of LinkedIn at the
Yeah.
time, had this great phrase of "seek first to understand," and he was very good at that,
Yeah.
and very good at like taking a beat, going like, "Doug seems exceptionally upset. What really is the reason behind that?
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
may not be what's on the surface." And I've tried to apply that, but it's a great point. Let's take a tangent for a minute, just because you mentioned Sales Loft Clary merger. Thoughts?
I can't. So you're in a zone. There are things I can and can't comment on. I
Okay,
can't. It's a great question. I just can't comment on anything that relates to
yeah,
portfolio companies. I mean, I can
got it.
talk in general about consolidation. That I can do. So,
Sure.
I
Why don't
mean,
we do that?
yeah. So very obviously, right? There's a way for people to want to consolidate their tech stacks in general. And if anything, right, AI, which I know is a focus of your podcast, which I love,
Mhm.
um, is accelerating that
Yep.
because you get more benefit out of having right all these things: your conversation intelligence, your deal intelligence,
Mhm.
your CRM data, right? Like everything, right? You just get more data means more benefit to cross those silos and provide guidance. So I think like no brainer on the consolidation. And then I mean the key pieces, right, are the usual suspects, right? It's your account and contact data, it is your meeting intelligence. It is your forecasting and pipeline management systems, right? It's your sales engagement, and then like those companies. I don't know if anyone's quite done it yet. But then the next piece is post sale, right? So I
Right.
mean, I guess they would argue the collective of sales engagement and whatever, like all these companies, they would argue that they do CS use cases too. But I don't think they're really there yet, right? Like they don't have the capabilities that um, the post sale folks um, have yet
Right.
at the same level of discipline. But that's logical that that stuff will come together. And there's always this push and pull between best of breed and full suite
Right.
solutions. And it's always going to be the case that like there's a best of breed tech out there that's a bit better. So we're in a wave right now of clearly of consolidation.
Yeah. Do you see an advantage to kind of the build versus buy approach in that matter from a data standpoint?
Of an internal build of these things versus buying like one of these consolidated platforms.
Well, I meant in general, like, if I look at the players in that space, obviously, someone like Gong has taken more of a build ourselves approach. Somebody
Yeah,
like
how
Outreach
they
or Clary have been like, let's acquire our way into this. But you bring up a great point, which is there's also the question of people building their own stuff as
Yeah.
well.
The reason I bring that up, I'll come to your specific question, but the reason I bring that up is in addition to my my day job. I'm not going to call it a side hustle. It's like borderline volunteering. I also teach a course at the University of Chicago Booth for CROs, and I asked the recent one of the recent cohorts about their use of AI, and like everyone's using it. They were actually confused, I think, a little bit between what. Well, I asked, who's using agentic? And
Mhm.
they all kind of, most of them raised their hand, and then I asked them, "Well, what do talk to me about your use cases?" And none of them were agentic, right? Like they were just
Yeah.
standard use cases. But they brought up some like cool use cases, and the ditto for our portfolio companies, by the way, same pattern. And overwhelmingly, people are DIYing, like they're building right
Mm.
now. Which is a whole separate tangent. But yeah, in terms of these companies and their strategy of like buy versus build, I come at it from an economic point of view more than anything else. There's well, economic plus one other thing. So on the economic point of view, back when I was at SalesLoft, the valuations were 20x, 30x, whatever. It was not practical for us to acquire, except in a couple of instances.
Mhm.
We were rather non-acquisitive. We acquired a conversation intelligence company, and we acquired a deal technology, and we ended up having to do like a pretty significant code base rewrite on those. But
Yep.
like it came with some distribution, it came with some brand, it came with a lot of from the people, the engineers, and the product management team. Like they had a lot of knowledge and iterations, having right like
Right.
done the thing. So that worked out perfectly fine. But it was just, yeah, we had to mostly build because it was impractical to buy at that point. Things have changed now, right? Is there's a whole lot of companies out there who have great tech, but because of the degree of competition that's out there, they're struggling from a distribution point of view. So
Yep.
I think right now, if I were advising a portfolio company, I'd probably advise them to buy. And again, with the understanding that, hey, the thing you're buying may not be like ready to sell,
Mhm.
but great if it is. But what you're really buying is the humans who have had the experience and the iterations to sort of very, very quickly. And the good news about I still code. I'm a hacker, not a programmer, so I can't profess to be like deeply expert in this, but I can code a ton faster now than I did before
Right.
Cursor and tools like Cursor were around. So I think they can kind of reconstitute this stuff and integrate it in an easier way. So yeah, right now I would say buy and optimize is probably the better strategy.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a post that I was engaging with on LinkedIn recently where somebody was like, "Yeah, I think the incumbent CRMs are dead. I just watched somebody, vibe code a CRM in 48 hours," and I was just like, "Sounds great. Good luck." Right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think there's an element of getting something really fast, but getting something deep still takes a long time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think I agree. Getting something deep takes a long time, and you can't underestimate the iterations on UX that are necessary, and you can't underestimate the bigger thing, which is distribution.
Right.
And UX also, and like in particular, right, is I'm sure there's a book on this. I read a lot, so I would love to find a book on this. Like I want someone to go in depth of why did Zoom beat the prior generation of GoToMeeting and WebEx and whatever? Why did Slack beat HipChat? And why did HipChat beat whatever instant AOL Instant Messenger way, 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 way back, right?
Right.
Because these are fundamentally the same things, but
Yep.
um, the UX is just kind of better. I'm sure there's some underlying, like HTML5 came about when Zoom came on, so that was a big driver, and they were first to that, so it just worked better. But I mean, fundamentally, is doing the same thing. So, I because of completeness of my, I mentioned that there's another thing that's a big consideration in the acquisition on the buy build thing, and maybe it's an A and a B. The A is the culture fit,
Right.
because I've been at companies where we've acquired and things have gone really well, And I've been at companies where we've acquired and things went poorly. I can even think of an instance where we acquired two companies on the exact same day. They had this, it was like the same deal size,
Uh-huh.
and like everything the same. One went spectacularly well, one went super poorly. And the culture fit was the whole explanation behind that. But then the other comment is there's another great book out there. It's John Chambers's book right after he left Cisco. I want to say it was called maybe Connecting the Dots, although I may have that mixed up. So it's more look for the John Chambers
Okay.
book. And he talks about Cisco's acquisition strategy, and he references some of the academic literature which pretty conclusively proves that you're statistically way more likely to succeed when you acquire a company that um, is much smaller, right?
Uh-huh.
So that strategy I've seen work much more than you know two mergers, like mergers of equals. It's generally better to pick smaller stuff up. And for SalesLoft, right, we picked up a really small conversation intelligence company. We picked up a really small deals company. And at least at the time, I mean, again, I can't comment on the current merger, but like at least at the time, that was definitely the right approach. It's really hard to munch together two similar sized companies, or even like if you're Cisco and you buy some monster company, like maybe things have changed in the post Chambers era, but they tend, the strategy tends to be acquiring smaller companies and
Right.
and tuning. Cisco's other, just as a side, like the other key takeaway from that book, which I think is really important, is like the way they went about identifying targets was, and I think this applies to the consolidation in the go-to-market space also, is they just went out and talked to their customers about what tech the customers were excited about and or buying and or using, or that Cisco was losing to. And if they were losing to somebody, emerging and small, or the CIOs and CTOs that they were selling to were super excited, then they bought that company. Like
Yeah.
you don't, it doesn't, that's all you have to do, right? And there's plenty of that available.
Yeah, in hindsight, it's not a rocket science, but very few people are that disciplined in doing it. I do have to say, I was, obviously at LinkedIn when Microsoft acquired us, and it's a hat tip to Satya. I think they did a brilliant job in that one, where they literally came to us and said, "We're just gonna," as he used to say, you couldn't tell I worked for Microsoft except my share said Microsoft.
Yeah.
I had to use Microsoft Outlook, and I can get you a discount on Xboxes. That was it. Like
Yeah, yeah.
nothing else
And
changed,
there's a
right?
lot of, by the way, there's probably a lot of people who don't even know that LinkedIn is owned by
Oh
Microsoft.
yeah,
I bet the
yeah,
majority of people don't know that.
yeah. And I think what they did so well is and then they named put Jeff in charge of the integration.
Yeah.
So and we that got tested multiple times. There were some large customers who came to Microsoft who Microsoft discounts heavily when they're kind of selling you the full suite, and Salesforce. Like when I was running Sales Navigator, there was no discretionary discounting. Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was literally like
I remember because I tried to negotiate a discount on Sales Nav and I was unsuccessful. But
yeah.
there was zero competition, right? Like why
Right.
should
Why
LinkedIn
why
discount?
why do it? And that was, a hat tip to Mike Gamson, who was running, sales at that time. They eventually, I think, put a slight piece in there, like they had done with Recruiter, but it's very minimal.
Yeah, when I
And
was side note is like if you can do it right. When I was at Gartner, I was there for 16 years, and in 2004, which was like 6 years into my tenure, a new CEO came on board, and he looked around and he's like, "Why are we discounting?"
yeah,
Because by 2004, Gartner had decisively won.
right.
Forrester probably would have been the closest number two, and they were like really distant number two. So he just told all the salespeople like, "Stop."
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's still true, but there was no discounting for the next. I was there for another whatever the math would be. Um, I can't do that. My brain is failing me. Another 6 years, I guess, or 8 years, and we never discounted during that time.
42 years in dog years. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you obviously see a ton of portfolio companies at kind of all stages, from very early to late stage. Um, First of all, just from a RevOps function, when do you generally advise companies to bring on RevOps?
We've looked at the data on this, and it's usually right around 10 sellers or so. Before that, they have usually some either outsourced Salesforce admin, or they have somebody like an SDR or someone or an AE who just has some Salesforce or HubSpot proficiency, and kind of does the work. But yeah, when they're around 10 plus, they start to bring on a RevOps person. And it's a progression. Like the first RevOps person is usually somebody who's a Salesforce admin, right? Like it's much more
Mhm.
tactical, not super strategic. The second one is going to be the person who's going to lay the foundation for like be the strategic leader, and they're like more of a jack of all trades strategy, but also analytics is super key for them, and then they're going to do bits and pieces of other things. Then you start to layer on the specialized, like as you're growing with every whatever 10 to 15 more sellers, right? You can add another RevOps person, and eventually you have a commissions person, and then you have a territory person,
Yeah.
and then you might eventually you get big enough that you have multiples of those, but you not only have that, like the big companies are going to have the equivalent of like what people know of as HR business partners or finance
Mhm.
partners, but they're RevOps partners. Sometimes those people are called field operations.
Right.
So they're sitting embedded, semi-embedded, right, with maybe your head of European sales and your head of North America sales, and you can slice and slice bigger and bigger and bigger companies. You have more and more of those partners who are supporting, you know, field operations for the different sales leaders.
So it's interesting. At LinkedIn, we had, you do get spoiled working for large companies and coming back and starting a startup. At LinkedIn, I had a team called BizOps, which was phenomenal. I kind of called it Business Siri at the time. This was
Yeah.
pre ChatGPT, and you could ask questions like, you know. Hey, why don't you go tell me? And it was a bunch of ex McKinsey guys and similar consulting firms. You could ask questions like, hey, I'm trying to figure out what's the best opportunity to go after. Should we go, go after new logos? Should we go deeper in existing customers? Or what is the magic moment when somebody's in a trial where they are more likely to convert or not churn later? And they would just go off and do deep, deep, deep research and come
Yeah.
back with these answers. And I was blown away as a startup guy. I was blown away. I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. How do you think, in the era that we're now in, that strategic role of BizOps, RevOps, because we had the same thing, on the sales side of LinkedIn. How far do you think AI goes towards helping, general operators like me answer those questions?
I would split predictive ML, like predictive AI or ML from generative. I
Yeah.
think the predictive stuff is more useful there. And
Mhm.
maybe the interface is like the blend, right? It's a little bit of this age, like the agentic just means like you have given this thing, whatever you want to call it, the power to interact with other systems, right? With email, with CRM, with whatever. Not necessarily just as a source of data, but also like as a system of action. Um,
Mhm.
but okay, so you could ask those in natural language form the way that you did with your BizOps team or others do
Right.
with field operations. But the underlying core, I think, is the ML piece. And what I think that screams for is, and I don't know if this is or will be a trend, but I think what it screams for is embedding data scientists inside of the RevOps team.
Hmm.
And just to make things really fuzzy, there's this term, I think it started in Europe and then Clay popularized it in North America, the go-to-market engineer.
Right.
Um, I think that that's a misnomer for this role. Like a go-to-market engineer is defined by the folks, currently it's if you were to whatever GPT that LLM that, it would tell you it was this person who like was responsible for data management and enrichment and blah blah blah. Like they are a tool user. They're not a data scientist.
Right.
Um, so I think there's a role for data scientists, and it's more in smaller companies. Like a lot of our portfolio companies are sub 100 million ARR.
Mhm.
In those smaller companies, they probably can't afford to have a dedicated data scientist on the RevOps team. Instead, they're going to tap into the data science expertise. So, like case in point, I was on the call with one of our portfolio companies this morning, and they were working on how to optimize churn and retention.
Mhm.
And on that call was the C in that case the CRO, the head of RevOps, and a data scientist from their data and engineering team. And ultimately, the because I've had experience with that kind of modeling before, I was saying like, okay, here's the statistical models that I've used, here's the approach I've used, in order to be able to a prioritize the accounts, but then b trigger workflow for
Right.
the CSMs on what plays to run as a result of health score gaps. So, like, I think that's the model for the smaller companies, but then I think the bigger companies have enough work for the data science, like to actually have embedded data scientists on the RevOps team, and they probably exist. I just deal with sub $100 million companies. We have another team at Insight that deals with the 100 million plus. So my team is 100 minus, so I just don't see them there. But yeah, I think that's the answer.
You make a great point, which is I think for a lot of people today, AI equals LLMs.
Mhm.
And it's clearly much broader than that. But where do you think that most of the companies that you interact with, where do you think their uh, data sits in relative to what it needs to be for them to really do that kind of data science work?
Short answer is not good enough.
Yeah.
Uh, so again, the case in point of that company, they realized that actually, it was another one I was talking to that was yesterday, but the same. It's like true, universally true. So I was talking to another company, and I said, "Hey, um, where are you in your use of AI for driving growth and efficiency?" And the first thing they said was, "We're actually doing foundational work on our data just to make sure that it's like usable for doing this because of the whole garbage in, garbage out thing, especially in machine learning. Like that's really critical." The one use case that they said was super low hanging fruit for them was secure filling out security questionnaires
Hmm.
because those are getting more and more complex, and it took they were able to cut that from whatever days to minutes. And I asked them, how did they do that? And again, most of the portfolio companies and other CROs I talk to are doing a lot of DIY. In that particular case, their existing vendor, like governance, risk, and compliance (GRC) vendor, added AI capability to help with security questionnaires. And I think a lot of the RFP vendors also are able to do that. So there's some good tech out there to be able to do that. I think that's a case where it's harder to DIY that particular thing versus some other things. So yeah, that one, all the contracts, right, and all the prior security questionnaires they had access to, so the data was a lot easier to put together. But yeah, in terms of like the other data, yeah, it's still often not good enough for that other work.
Can you name the vendor that was helping out with the security reviews
Yeah,
or
because it's not a
RFP?
portfolio company. If I'm not mistaken, it's called Vanta.
Vanta,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
think I'm a member of GTM Fund, and I know that they're doing, their whole wave is on SOC 2 compliance and obviously ISO and a bunch of those things. So I was imagining that was the one there that was doing it. Yeah, so it's interesting. At my last company or FlipTop, we were doing kind of account and lead scoring. And the very interesting thing that we found after we started connecting, dozens and then, hundreds of Salesforce instances was the only data that we could trust was when a rep was going to get paid. And the only information that we could trust was the deal probably closed. There was at least one contact that was probably correct. And there was, it probably the date and the size and the name of the company was correct. Data quality just fell off a cliff after that, right?
Yeah.
So it is really anything where you're relying on manual data entry, I think, is challenging.
The tools there have existed for a while, right? I mean, I haven't tracked it as closely, but I remember that was like the claim to fame of People AI for a long time was they would, be able to collect a lot more of that data. And I think, right, the conversation intelligence companies, right, the Gongs of the world, I will disclose if anything's a port code. None of those are port codes.
Okay.
I think they're doing a better and better job of getting stuff into your CRM. And then there's an emerging class of companies, probably you guys, momentum, attention, right? Like I think all these class of companies are doing a better job of getting more data into the system.
Yeah, I think, one of our founding principles was you can't have good AI with bad data. And so we were
Yeah.
like, everything from how do you automatically contact and create and enrich the contacts and companies? How do you capture the conversation and email information, kind of the unstructured data? And then ultimately, I'm still amazed that most companies, because they start off with HubSpot or Salesforce or Pipedriver, Addio, or something similar, are basically in this kind of forms over database architecture where I change a stage and all of a sudden the old values are all blown away. And until you get to a certain scale where you've glued snowflakes or Databricks or something like that to it, you don't have this historical tracking. And I think that one of the things that we made a decision from day one in coffee was that's going to become some of the most important data over time
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
really understand that stuff. So I
It
think
really, yeah,
that's,
it is.
you know, and it's not obvious to a customer on day one, right? Somebody starts in coffee, they're like, doesn't matter that there's a data warehouse behind it. On week one, when they can do a pipeline compare, similar to what Clary used to do, and Gong, where I can just say, show me the deltas in my pipeline. That's really interesting. I think the real unlock comes down the road a few quarters when you're like, tell me how I'm doing this quarter versus where I was at the same point, the same quarter last year, or starting to ask more of those, DizOps, RevOps questions. I think that's where it really starts to
Yeah.
get interesting.
By the way, the switches in stages, yeah, is it was had historically been the bane of my existence, right? In many places. I actually think that's a thing where generative does help. So we have, we apply a lot of AI to improve our own operational efficiency internally. So take the diligence, for example. So in the course of diligence for a new investment, we'll get pipeline data from people, and a lot of times it's pretty icky.
Mhm.
They change stages, but we have a tool we use that can map changes in stages because it's so common. We had to sort of build this capability.
Yeah.
So, or we have a vendor partner who does this for us. So it like auto maps that asks you like, hey, we noticed there's a stage change. Is this the correct mapping? So it uses AI calls in order to figure out what is the most likely mapping of those stages. It does a really good job. So um, we're still, I would say it's AI augmentation. We don't completely trust it to do it. We still want to put eyeballs on it. But y- you know, uh, uh, as I was listening to your podcast, I think with Amanda Kahlo from OneMind,
Right.
right, and she was talking about the human augmentation piece. That boundary continues to shift, right? There's more and more and more that will trust AI to do autonomously. Um, but at least for that one, right? We might be writing a $50 million or $100 million check. We're gonna we're not just gonna trust the AI to map to do the whole thing. We really need eyeballs on it.
It's funny. Somebody was asking me the other day about like, do you trust your AI to send emails on your behalf? I'm like, no, I don't yet. Right. I want a
Yeah,
human in the loop. I want some piece. But it's remarkable to me that I can jump in a Waymo, or jump in, a Tesla with autopilot and suddenly go 70 miles an hour down the freeway and trust that. So, you
yeah.
have to imagine that we're going to in B2B software do much better than what we're
Trust
doing
trust
today.
it too. Yeah. When generative stuff first came along, my holy grail, and maybe this does exist now, I just don't use it or know about it, would be I just want it if I get an email, I just want it to draft the response for me.
Right.
And maybe someone was mentioning to me the other day, I think Super Me, that you could create like
Mm.
an LLM that was put all your content that you've ever done up in there, and then it can kind of imitate you. So I would love a Super Me version. Again, also not a portfolio company. I would love a Super Me kind of thing if I understand the product correctly, that would draft responses to emails with my not just my tone, but also my knowledge and approach,
Right.
right? Because I tend to have a very like structured, analytical, data-driven approach. So I would want not just the tone piece, but I need that in there too.
Yeah, I've heard Fixer does a decent job of that. I haven't played around with it in
Mm,
depth, but we have some basic capabilities inside of Coffee where, from the transcript we're drafting an email, but it's still early days. Like
mm.
it doesn't, different companies have different. I'm very much the shorter the better, the more bullet points the better. That's my style. Some people want very long, more detailed things, right? So how do we start to get more of that structure, that voice, or even kind of templatize that, but in a not just field mapping, but more of a using AI to to say this is the general structure I'd like to have, but take that transcript and kind of move it over there. So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of rich
And it
opportunity in
and
that
it
space.
and it should learn. Like, I know if you go to an LLM and you say I'm a huge John McMahon, like, fanboy. For people who don't know him, he was the CRO of, PTC, and then like, they did Blade Logic. Blade Logic, I think, got acquired by BMC, then ran sales for BMC, and then, like, he's his progeny, I guess, if you call them, went off and formed Zscaler and App Dynamics and Snowflake and Rubrik and, like, all these amazing companies. So, because he has a lot of content out there, I can go into, my favorite LLM and basically say, you know, you are John McMahon.
Mhm,
How would you answer this question? And I do it all the time, right? And I know some people have talked about, like, creating an advisory board, if you will, like,
uh-huh,
of how different personalities would answer questions. I think that's quite valuable.
yeah. You get so kind of you've got very interesting pattern detection capabilities across lots of portfolio companies coming to you. What are some of the most common queries you get?
It's very seasonal.
Mhm,
Um, So, at least in our role as advisors, we get a lot of right now, we're getting a lot of annual planning questions.
uh-huh,
So those are the usual things. It's like, hey, we're moving jobs to be done around between our, SDRs, AEs, AMs, renewal specialists, CSMs, technical account managers, whatever, right? So, like, the org structure and design question is a really big one. We get a lot of planning ratio questions, right?
uh-huh,
Like, to your point earlier, how many RevOps people should you have? How many sales engineers should you have? How many CSMs should you have as a function of whatever org size or ARR or whatever? So, like, the planning stuff. I would say the other super duper common one is comp plans,
uh-huh,
which that one's it's a little surprising to me because pretty much everybody, at least for their AEs, is on a 50-50 comp plan with a
right,
4x to 5x quoted to OTE. Like,
uh-huh,
they then want to create all this craziness underneath the surface of it, but I try to coach them to just, like, keep it simple.
yeah,
Maybe there are some rare exceptions, but those exceptions should be very rare. So, yeah, and then, I guess maybe I saved what's the biggest one right now for last, which is, how do I get growth and efficiency out of AI? Because they don't know the answer to that, and I mean, candidly, I don't really think we or anyone in sales has a great answer to that. In CS, I think the answer is a little stronger.
uh-huh,
I was listening to the CEO of Decagon, I think it's Decagon, the other day on, I think it was 20 VC or something like that, one of the other podcasts, and he expressed something that I see in the zeitgeist right now, which is sales has not really realized the potential. And I mean, people are a little disappointed, I think, but sales has not really yet realized the potential of AI. And I need to think more deeply about why that is, but it could be the data. It
uh-huh,
could be the nature of the fact that, like, above a certain dollar threshold, you need to interact. You want to interact with a human, and it needs to feel personal, right? Like, in business or in your personal life. Like, I had to replace my roof recently, and that's a tens of thousands of dollar purchase, and, like, I bought from the person I trusted, and having bought a lot in my life on the professional side, I know that the most important thing to me when I'm buying is that when something goes wrong, as it invariably will, they're gonna be there and have my back.
yep,
And that was the thing I'm looking for. And to this salesperson's credit, he was super upfront about the fact that, like, we make mistakes, and when we make mistakes, we fix them. Um, and also, to his credit, like, after they did the roof, I got a call a week and a half later. It wasn't a mistake. He's like, "Hey, you know what? When we did the roof, we noticed that one of your vents was venting into, I don't not a house technical person, but I think into the soffits,
yeah,
which I think I know what that is, but he said it really should be venting out of the roof. So we're going to come back for free and change that to vent out of your roof instead of your soffits, which is, like, amazing, right?
right, Right. He's your roof guy for life now.
Yeah, and I'm gonna recommend him. I left when he came to do that, he said, "You still have our lawn sign up." And I'm like, "Yeah, you guys did a great job. I want other people to, buy from you." So, right? Like, yeah, I mean, who would have thought, right? That would be my greatest recent purchase experience, but it just speaks to, when you're gonna spend, an uncomfortable amount of money personally or professionally, you're gonna wanna talk to a human, and that threshold moves up over time, right? Like,
Well,
for, a business purchase that's whatever, like $100 a month or whatever, maybe
right.
even $1,000 a month, maybe not, you know? If you're gonna spend $100,000 on a work purchase, like, you're gonna talk to a human.
Absolutely. It's interesting though, because you mentioned Amanda before from One Mind, and certainly she's got a spicy take on all of this, where we're all saying, "No, no, no, your job is safe, you're fine." She's like, "No, it's not." Right? These things are going to start coming after things, and certainly, we see the layoffs in the customer success world happening as more AI is taking more there. But to your point, I don't think you're seeing it and you're planning, conversations with your CEOs yet. I'm not seeing it in terms of sales teams getting reduced. It may be that, they're letting attrition happen, or
Yeah.
they're reducing their future headcount plans. Do you see any impact that's
I
happening
agree
from?
with Amanda's take. I think the reason you or I might not be seeing it, as much is because, okay, let's say even just regular LLMs make everybody 10% more effective, but it doesn't completely do our job, right? If you only have 5 CSMs, right? Like, you can't cut half a person.
Right,
But if you're a big company and you have 100 people doing something, you can, and even if it doesn't do the whole job, you just made everyone 10% more effective, you can cut 10 and end up with 90.
right.
So, I think it definitely is a bigger impact to the bigger companies. That's kind of an obvious statement, but I think, again, it's important to do the critical thinking on, like, why one might not see it in the smaller companies as rapidly, because it's not completely taking over jobs outside of maybe customer success, not success, customer support. But I totally agreed with Amanda's take, that yeah, we need to be empathetic that this is something that is going to be highly disruptive. One of the things that drives me like effing ballistic, because I think it shows such low empathy, is this like, AI is not going to take your job. People who learn AI are going to take your job. Which, the reason it bothers me is of low empathy is it's not acknowledging that there's a class of, I mean, us too, right? But, like, there are people who can't control the tsunami that is
Right.
coming at them, and I can't blame them for that either. If you're a customer support person, um, I don't think you can blame the customer support person for, getting hit by the tsunami. So, yeah, I would be, yeah, yeah, and so, yes, it is making people more effective. I mean, one of my kids is starting law school, and,
Mhm.
I have a little fear, right? I have a little fear because I don't think you're probably not going to need as many lawyers. You got great legal tech out there that's making people more efficient, and all the research and writing, like, even if it doesn't do the entire job, those bigger law firms are just not going to need as many people anymore.
Especially on the research side. Yeah, my daughter, my youngest, is the same, and I think the idea of sending off the intern to go look at prior case law. Why? Right? Yeah, it just seems
Yeah, they
crazy.
don't need it. I know from talking to him that there's programs that they're hiring interns merely to have them as staff. Like, they hire them in between years 2 and 3 to make an offer to them for when they come back, but the work that they do between years, th you know, in the summer between year 2 and 3, they may not even build a customer for,
Wow.
like, they're just they're just but there's gonna be less need for that, right? Like, just less
Yeah.
need for that.
Well, I know we're coming up on time, Jeremy. I could keep talking to you forever. This has been great. Let's just kind of move into speed round and learn a little bit more about you. So, tell us what you like to do for fun outside of work.
Anyone who knows me knows that immediate answer is fly fishing. I'm a super
Yeah,
addicted fly angler for 25 plus years.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Outside of that, what is maybe one other thing we'd be surprised to know about you?
Super cat lover. I have 4
Mm.
cats. So, yeah, love, love, love. I love all animals. We just, dog is too much responsibility, but yeah, super, super cat lover. So that's my other passion.
All right. And then kind of, I'm a product geek, you're a product geek, what's kind of a personal product that you like to use or really admire?
Oh, what do I use regularly? I have heard you ask that with other guests, so I should have premeditated this. I don't have anything like super insightful. Yeah, maybe this is silly, but I hated seltzer my whole life. Seltzer's a
Mm.
product, and somehow I got addicted. So yeah, I couldn't. I can't go a day without seltzer and non-alcohol beer. Also, it's
Okay.
been like I stopped the alcohol post COVID, so
Do you have a
non-alcohol
favorite
beer.
one of those? Huh?
They're all good. They're
Yeah.
all good. Like the mainstream brands like Peroni and
Mhm.
Stella and like everybody, they all make good ones.
They're all stepping up. Absolutely. And then finally, just how can our listeners kind of stay in touch with you and help you on your journey?
LinkedIn, yeah, is definitely the best way. I'm I wish LinkedIn would lift the. This sounds like a very high class problem, but would lift the 30,000
Yeah.
connection thing because I constantly have to go in and delete, which I hate doing. But so like they could definitely attempt to connect
Right.
and I'm there like multiple times a day. So especially if someone messages me, I'll respond.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been a great conversation, Jeremy. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Take care.